He who does not know how to be silent will not know how to speak. Nietzsche. You imagine power as dominance of words, but Nietzsche turns the blade. Silence itself is a weapon sharper than any argument. When you withhold speech, who begins to squirm? The other person or the restless part of you that fears being forgotten? When you refuse to feed the duel of chatter, who loses ground first? The one who attacks or the one who waits? What reveals more about a person, what they say, or what they cannot stand in your silence? Ask yourself, how often have you betrayed your own position by rushing to fill the pause? How many times has your mouth bought relief while your dignity slipped through the cracks? And if restraint is not cowardice but proportion, why do you still equate quiet with weakness? Silence in this register is not void, it is voltage. It sharpens perception, steadies the body, and forces the mask of the other to slip. Words are rehearsed, reactions under silence are not. Which would you rather govern, the rehearsed or the raw? To outsmart without speaking is not trickery, but discipline. Breath before reply, posture over protest, presence instead of panic. The silence you hold is not absence, but governance. When you decline to fight on the battlefield of noise, you shift the ground entirely. So when the next provocation comes, will you be pulled into the flood? Or will you let silence outlast them until their own words reveal what you already knew? You live in a culture that worships noise, debates measured by volume, meetings filled with interruptions, timelines crowded with endless commentary. Words have become currency, spent cheaply, and often while silence is treated as emptiness or weakness. But Nietzsche's warning cuts deeper. Silence is not lack, it is leverage. What if the most decisive move is not to rush into the fray, but to withhold, to let the storm of words exhaust itself while you stand still? Ask yourself plainly, when was the last time you regretted keeping silent? When was the last time you regretted speaking too soon? Which has cost you more, measured restraint or reflexive reply? Do you notice how often you defend yourself not because truth requires it, but because guilt or insecurity cannot bear the weight of pause? Silence exposes the machinery of others. In your quiet, they project, reveal their anxieties, and betray their motives. Every fidget, every rambling justification, every attempt to fill the void teaches you more than their crafted arguments ever could. Meanwhile, your own body steadies, breath deepens, arousal drops, and perception sharpens. The absence of noise becomes the container in which truth, yours and theirs, emerges unforced. This is not passivity, it is governance. To refuse the duel of chatter is not retreat, but proportion. Silence becomes your architecture, one lawful pause before response, one delayed line that carries weight because it was not rushed. In that cadence, you stop spending yourself at the speed of provocation. The question is not whether others will speak, they will. The question is whether you will let their noise govern you, or whether you will govern yourself with silence until the truth they cannot hide surfaces on its own. To understand why silence can outsmart more effectively than words, you have to see it through Jung's grammar of the psyche. Silence is not mere absence. It is a stage where your persona, shadow complexes, and self all contend. If you do not know which one is speaking, or in this case withholding, you confuse avoidance with authority, cowardice with governance. The persona is the mask that buys you belonging. Words are its favorite currency, polished explanations, defenses, clever remarks. But the more you feed it, the more it spends you. Silence exposes this dynamic. Can you endure being misread for a moment, or does your persona leap to fix the misunderstanding before it ripens? Each time you cannot bear the pause, you reveal that you are captive to the mask. Outsmarting begins when you let the persona starve until the mask becomes servant, not master. Shadow holds the energies you exile, anger that could guard a boundary, appetite that could size a yes, rest that could power your presence. When silence unnerves you, it is often because shadow stirs demanding recognition. Do you hire it as an ally, anger lending gravity to your stillness? Or do you exile it, only to have it erupt later in sarcasm or sabotage? Outsmarting is not suppression, but integration, the discipline to let shadow guard the door while persona bows out of the performance. Complexes are the traps that turn silence into a battlefield. A cutting remark reactivates the humiliation loop. Suddenly, your quiet is not discipline, but collapse. Or guilt spikes and you rush to fill the void, confusing conditioned alarm with moral obligation. Will you recognize when a complex hijacks the silence? Can you name it, breathe, and wait until observing ego returns? Without this recognition, your silence is not strategy, but surrender. Projection makes silence even more potent. In your restraint, others project their anxieties, fears, and suspicions onto you. They read your quiet as judgment, superiority, indifference, revealing more about themselves than about you. The question is whether you will let their projections colonize you, or whether you will hold the line long enough to see them unmask themselves. Which teaches you more what a person says to impress you, or what they assume when you refuse to speak. Compensation and enantiodromia, Jung's balancing laws, also govern silence. A culture drunk on noise inevitably flips. The one who can remain still becomes the one with power. But beware, lean too far into mutants, and it curdles into passivity or contempt. Silence must be a container, not a wall. Do you return when you said you would? Do you offer one line, however brief, to prove your silence is proportionate, not punitive? The test is motive and follow-through. Silence that never returns is not wisdom, it is exile masquerading as strength. Finally, the self, the center that can carry opposites, sets cadence. Silence, when governed by the self, is not retreat but proportion, warmth held with restraint, discernment timed with presence. You can let others reveal themselves without needing to rush, while also offering your own truth in due course. Ask yourself, are you silent because you fear or because you govern? Are you delaying out of cowardice or to give truth lawful shape? This is the Jungian foundation of outsmarting without words. Persona softened, shadow reassigned, complexes named, projections withdrawn, balance endured, and self enthroned. Silence in this register is not emptiness, but architecture. It holds the storm without collapsing, reveals others without exposing you, and teaches your nervous system that delay is not danger. The decisive question remains, when the room heats, will you let noise rule you, or will you let silence, properly governed, become the ground on which others undo themselves? Picture the scene. A Monday meeting stretches past its limit. Voices rise, charts flash, egos spar for airtime. One colleague slams the table, accusing another of negligence. The room tilts toward frenzy. Your chest tightens, your reflex begs you to speak, defend, correct, soothe, perform. But you do not. You breathe. Once, you lean back, you stay still. What happens next is not magic, but law. The silence you hold becomes a mirror. Projection floods in. Are you judging me? Why won't you answer? Do you agree with him? Their words tangle, their bodies fidget, their arguments repeat themselves. Who is outsmarting whom? The one who spills everything in noise? Or the one who lets them defeat themselves in the vacuum? Minutes pass, though they feel like hours. You study, not retreat. You see the anxious smile of the accuser betraying insecurity. You notice the defensive chatter of the accused, rehearsed and brittle. You hear the volume rise, but content thin. All the while, your silence gathers weight. When you finally speak, "Let's pause and revisit tomorrow," the single line cuts through because it was not dragged by panic. Now translate this into your own life. At the dinner table, a relative provokes. Do you rush to prove your worth, or can you let their need for dominance expose itself without your help? On social media, bait is dropped. Do you leap in trading dignity for dopamine, or do you let silence outlast the noise, watching the frenzy consume itself? In love, a partner jabs to test your patience. Do you react with heat, or do you let the moment cool until your reply is measured, not manic? The test is internal. Your persona screams to explain, to be seen as fair. Your shadow strains at the leash, wanting to lash back. Complexes stir, replaying humiliations from childhood. Can you govern them long enough to keep still? Can you let your nervous system learn that delay is not defeat, and that silence is not void, but container? After the meeting ends, you notice the shift. Others now look to you not because you dominated, but because you didn't drown. The one who shouted most feels smaller. The one who defended longest feels tired. Your presence feels larger, not by words spent, but by words withheld. Is that not authority, power without performance? But here is the caution. Silence wielded as punishment becomes cruelty. If you withdraw to wound, you build walls, not containers. Do you return when you said you would, or do you let the silence harden into exile? The measure of your discipline is motive and follow-through. Silence outsmarts when it is proportionate. It fails when it is weaponized. Now ask yourself, when was the last time you regretted holding your tongue? When was the last time you regretted blurting? Which costs more, brief discomfort under silence, or the long repair after words you wish you could recall? And if silence reveals more truth in others than speech ever could, why do you still waste yourself at the speed of provocation? This is the typical scene, not grand, not theatrical, just a meeting, a dinner, a message thread. The choreography is ordinary: one breath, one pause, one lawful line. The outcome, however, is decisive. You stop renting your life to noise. You let others unmask themselves. You speak with weight instead of with volume. Outsmarting, in Nietzsche's register, is not conquest, but cadence. The quiet you keep becomes the stage where others reveal their truth, and you, without saying a word, hold the ground they cannot. Silence looks simple, but its power runs on mechanisms as precise as any law. If you want to outsmart without a word, you must understand what happens in your body, your mind, and your relationships when you refuse the duel of chatter. Otherwise, silence collapses into withdrawal or explodes into contempt. What makes the pause potent instead of empty? First, the physiology. When provocation lands, your body floods adrenaline, spikes, breath shortens, muscles tighten. The reflex is speech, defend, justify, retaliate. But if you hold silence and take one slow exhale, vagal tone rises, arousal drops, the observing ego returns. Your nervous system learns that delay is not danger. Do you notice how often you confuse urgency with importance? How many arguments have been nothing more than two flooded bodies mistaking arousal for truth? Second, the cognitive mechanism. Silence becomes a vessel for sorting what is mine, what is theirs, what belongs between. In the absence of immediate speech, projection shrinks and responsibility clarifies. The insult hurled across the table, does it actually describe you, or does it reveal their own fear? By not answering, you give space for that truth to surface. Without silence, you swallow their projection as your own. Do you want to spend your life rehearsing other people's anxieties, or do you want to hand them back? Third, the energetic and symbolic function. Shadow capacities, anger, appetite, rest are reassigned. Anger does not erupt. It guards the threshold, telling you when a line is crossed. Appetite sizes your yes, preventing overcommitment. Rest fuels the wattage behind your eventual word. Silence is the container in which these disowned allies return to service. What happens when you exile them again? You break your silence later with sarcasm, exhaustion, or collapse. Which serves you more, rage after the fact or proportion in the moment? Fourth, reinforcement. Each time you keep silence where reflex demanded speech, you trade the cheap relief of blurting for the durable presence of restraint. Your nervous system rewires the panic of pause, turns into confidence. Others adapt too. At first, they press harder, mistaking your quiet for weakness. But after repetition, the climate shifts. Your pause teaches them that noise won't govern you. Urgent becomes a call, not 10 frantic texts. Whose nervous system are you training right now, yours or theirs? Fifth, the ethical guardrail. Silence can heal or it can wound. If you vanish without return, you build walls, you starve connection. If you keep silence with proportion, warmth in tone, return on schedule, it becomes a container that protects both truth and people. The test is motive and follow-through. Are you withholding to punish or to preserve proportion? Do you return when you said, or do you let silence become exile? Which do you want to be remembered for, measured cadence or manipulative absence? Finally, the social mechanism. In a culture drunk on noise, silence redistributes power. Meetings recalibrate when one person refuses the flood. Families relearn timing when conflict is deferred to daylight. Online, your refusal to bite at bait exposes the frenzy for what it is. The mechanism scales. One pause becomes a pattern. One pattern becomes a culture. What single norm could you publish this week? No decisions while flooded urgent means call, so that silence is scaffolding, not eccentricity. So the mechanism in full physiological break, cognitive sorting, shadow reassignment, reinforcement loop, ethical guardrail, cultural scaffolding. Nothing mystical, everything lawful. The pause is not weakness, it is voltage. The quiet you hold is not void, it is architecture. The door that used to swing wildly kicked open by provocation or bolted by pride now swings on hinges you installed. The question remains when the next provocation lands, will you spend yourself at the speed of someone else's alarm? Or will you let silence govern until truth emerges unforced? Will you keep mistaking noise for power, or will you claim the greater authority of cadence? The mechanism is merciful because it is teachable. One breath, one pause, one lawful silence, and the ground of the encounter shifts. Who actually outsmarts whom when words run out? It will not be the one who drowned in noise. It will be the one who kept still long enough for the truth to arrive. Practical application begins where theory touches your nerves in real time. Silence is not an abstract virtue. It is a set of practices you can install so your body learns, your mind studies, and your presence holds weight without a word. You are not asked to master an art overnight. You are asked to rehearse one pause at a time until it becomes architecture. Start with physiology. When provocation strikes, your chest tightens, your pulse climbs, your mouth begs to speak. Instead of obeying, run the simplest drill. One full exhale, count 4 on the inhale, hold for 4, then extend 6 on the release. This vagal break interrupts the flood. Do you want to keep letting adrenaline dictate your words, or will you allow breath to reseat you in governance? Every silence worth keeping begins in the body. Next comes the lexicon of restraint. You are not vanishing, you are delaying with proportion. Prepare a handful of short, warm lines that prove your silence is container, not wall. I'll review tomorrow. Let's revisit in the morning. Not by text. If urgent, call. One sentence, no opera. Do you realize how many of your regrets come not from saying too little, but from saying too much in heat? What would shift if your next reply was measured by cadence, not panic? Then build structures around you. Decide which channels you will use and retire the rest. Publish your reply windows. I check messages at 9, 1, and 5. In your house, write rules on the wall. No conflict resolution while flooded. In your team, normalize daylight decisions. Architecture makes silence easier because it stops being eccentric and becomes civic hygiene. Which single rule could you write this week so others stop renting your nervous system by default? Reflection keeps the practice honest. Each night, write down 3 things: what pulled you hardest, what held you best, what you will alter tomorrow. Add 1 2-minute dream note, title, figure, tone, 1 action. Dreams reveal whether the unconscious trusts your vessel enough to brief you. Do you fear silence, or are you beginning to notice it as a place where even the unconscious is willing to meet you? Repair is part of the discipline. You will miss. You will snap or vanish too long, or harden into a wall. The work is not perfection, but proportion. When you fail, return with 1 line. I said I'd reply at 9. I missed. Here is my correction. No guilt-laced essay, no self-flagellation, just repair. Are you willing to treat repair as strength rather than proof of weakness? Measure what matters. Count how often resentment surfaces. Track the number of "sorry for the delay" notes. You will see them fall because you declared timelines at the front end. Watch your sleep, gain minutes, your dreams grow specific, your yes thicken from sugar to wood. If you believe what you measure, will you count dopamine and drama, or promises kept and rest restored? Finally, train your shadow into service. Anger guards thresholds so you do not spend yourself appeasing. Appetite sizes your commitments so you do not overpromise. Rest fuels the wattage of your eventual word. Each is a worker, not a saboteur, when seated at the table. Which shadow capacity will you assign tomorrow? Anger as sentinel, appetite as surveyor, rest as power plant. And when guilt calls you selfish, will you recognize it as a conditioned alarm, or will you bow to it again? This is application, not theater. Breath before speech. Pause before reply. 1 lawful line, 1 scheduled return. Repair when you miss. Build rules into your architecture. Share the grammar so others can cooperate with your cadence instead of tugging against it. Repeat until silence is no longer panic, but presence. So the final questions come when the next provocation lands. Will you rush into noise or let silence govern? Will you spend your dignity in cheap relief or hold it in a pause that outlasts frenzy? Will you weaponize silence into exile or containerize it into trust? The answer decides whether you drown with the loud or outsmart them without saying a word. Silence is not emptiness, it is governance. To outsmart without words is not trickery, but cadence. You no longer let provocation dictate your tempo. No longer lease your nervous system to the loudest voice in the room. The pause becomes your architecture. Breath steadies the body. Shadow stands guard. The persona softens. The self sets proportion. And the room recalibrates. Others reveal themselves in their noise. You reveal yourself in your restraint. Ask yourself plainly, how much of your life have you spent repairing words you wish you had not said?
How often have you mistaken blurting for bravery? How many times has guilt or fear pressed you to fill silence when silence itself would have revealed more? Which costs more, 30 seconds of discomfort under quiet or weeks of apology after you surrendered to noise? Nietzsche's edge is this: silence outlasts frenzy.
You win not by striking faster, but by refusing to play on the field of chatter. You govern your own pulse, and in that governance, others lose their hold. But beware, silence weaponized as punishment curdles into cruelty. The test is motive and return. Do you pause to preserve proportion, and do you come back when you said you would? Or do you harden into absence and call it strength? So your task is simple and mercifully repeatable. Tonight, choose one hinge: hours, channels, or tone.
Write one-rule decisions in daylight. Urgent means call, I'll reply at 9. Post it. Keep it once, keep it twice. Let repetition teach your body that delay is not danger. The final question is yours alone. When the next provocation lands, will you rush into noise, or will you let silence govern until truth surfaces? Outsmarting without a word is not a trick. It is the authority of a cadence you can live with. In the morning, will you claim it now, or keep surrendering to the flood?